Huntington Public Library, and today I am going to share with you one of my favorite holiday books, The Polar Express by Chris Van Allsburg. So welcome to Polar Express PJ Storytime. In your bags, you've got everything you need to make some hot chocolate so you can get cozy, and I hope you're wearing your Christmas pajamas like me so you can get cozy, drink your hot chocolate, and listen to the story. So here it is, The Polar Express by Chris Van Allsburg. I'm gonna just move this a tiny bit so that you guys can see the book. That might help, right? The Polar Express by Chris Van Allsburg. Here we go. On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound a friend had told me I'd never hear. The ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. There is no Santa, my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night, I did hear sounds, though not of ringing bells. From outside came the sounds of hissing steam and squeaking metal. I looked through my window and saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. There it is. It was wrapped in an apron of steam. Snowflakes fell lightly around it. A conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took a large pocket watch from his vest, then looked up at my window. I put on my slippers and robe. I tiptoed downstairs and out the door. All aboard! The conductor cried out. I ran up to him. Well, he said, are you coming? Where? I asked. Why, to the North Pole, of course, was his answer. This is the Polar Express. I took his outstretched hand, and he pulled me aboard. Now I'm going to switch. So this is my favorite page in the whole book. It always has been, even since I was a kid. The train was filled with other children, all in their pajamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols and ate candies with nougat centers as white as snow. We drank hot cocoa as thick and rich as melted chocolate bars. Outside, the lights of towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced northward. And I think this page now, I'm realizing, is probably a good time in the book to point out that this book won an award for its beautiful art called the Caldecott Medal. So it's important to make sure that you guys can see these pictures and how beautiful they are. So let me switch sides again because I want to make sure you have a good view. Here we go. Soon there were no more lights to be seen. We traveled through cold, dark forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness. We climbed mountains so high, it seemed as if we would scrape the moon. But the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. Look at that. The mountains turned into hills, the hills to snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the great polar ice cap. Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing on a frozen sea. There, said the conductor, is the North Pole. I think that part got a little cut off, so let me show you. Here comes the Polar Express, and all the way up ahead, you can see that it looks like a city, and that is the North Pole. The North Pole. It was a huge city standing alone at the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas toy was made. At first, we saw no elves. They are gathering at the center of the city, the conductor told us. That is where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas. Who receives the first gift? We all asked. The conductor answered, he will choose one of you. Look, shouted one of the children, the elves! Outside, we saw hundreds of elves. As our train drew closer to the center of the North Pole, we slowed to a crawl. So crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers. When the Polar Express could go no further, we stopped and the conductor let us outside. So I'm gonna get really close so you can see. Whoa, all these little tiny red dots, that's the elves. So there's hundreds of elves on these streets and they are very small. So they must be, there's a ton of them. So crowded. So here, we see Santa on this page. We pressed through the crowd to the edge of a large open circle. In front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and paced, ringing the silver sleigh bells that hung from their harnesses. It was a magical sound, like nothing I'd ever heard. Across the circle, the elves moved apart, and Santa Claus appeared. The elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us and, pointing to me, said, let's have this fellow right here. He jumped onto his sleigh. The conductor handed me up. I sat on Santa's knee and he asked, now, what would you like for Christmas? This is probably my other favorite page in the book. I knew that I could have any gift I could imagine, but the thing I wanted most for Christmas was not inside Santa's giant bag. What I wanted more than anything was one silver bell from Santa's sleigh. When I asked, Santa smiled. Then he gave me a hug and told an elf to cut a bell from a reindeer's harness. The elf tossed it up to Santa. He stood holding the bell high above him and called out, hold your bell up high and call out, the first gift of Christmas. A clock struck midnight. The elves roared their approval. Santa handed the bell to me and I put it in my bathrobe pocket. The conductor helped me down from the sleigh. Santa shouted out the reindeer's names and cracked his whip. His team charged forward and climbed into the air. Santa circled above us, then disappeared into the cold, dark, polar sky. You can tell he's high up because the elves look so tiny. So he's pretty far from them. He's very far from them and from everybody on the ground. And here he goes to deliver. As soon as we were back inside the Polar Express, the other children asked to see the bell. I reached into my pocket, but the only thing I felt was a hole. I had lost the silver bell from Santa's sleigh. Let's hurry outside and look for it, one of the children said. But the train gave a sudden lurch and started moving. We were on our way. It broke my heart to lose the bell. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children. I stood at my doorway and waved goodbye. The conductor said something from the moving train, but I couldn't hear him. What? I called out. He cupped his hands around his mouth. Merry Christmas, he shouted. The Polar Express let out a loud blast from its whistle and sped away. On Christmas morning, my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents. When it looked as if everything had been unwrapped, Sarah found one last small box behind the tree. It had my name on it. Inside was the silver bell. There was a note. Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket. Signed, Mr. C. I shook the bell. It made the most beautiful sound my sister and I had ever heard. But my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad." "Yes," my father said, "it's broken." When I'd shaken the bell, my parents had not heard a sound. At one time, most of my friends could hear the bell, but as years passed, it fell silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear its sweet sound. Though I've grown old, the bell still rings for me as it does for all who truly believe. The end. So that's The Polar Express by Chris Van Allsburg. And now I hope you'll join me while we make the crafts that are in your craft kits. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna show you our first craft, which is our little bell craft. It's a pretty simple one. So you've got everything you need in this little baggie. Take out your supplies. You should have a bell and a ribbon and a cute little believe charm. So we're just stringing these to make a bell like the one in the story. So you'll see you can just string the bell pretty easily and then add in the believe charm, which is kind of small. You probably need a grown-up to do this part. And I find that it helps when you pinch it and push it through. I hope you guys can see that. Pinch it and push it through. Center it a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect. And for mine, of course you can make it however you want, but for mine, I tied it up at the top. Just give it a little knot at the top or wherever you want to your craft. And there you go. You've got a nice little believe bell to hang up to think about the Polar Express. And now I'm going to show you our other craft, which is a little bit more involved, but still quite simple. And I'm going to try to have my kids show you this, but I'd like to just show you the pieces while they're not around. So we've got black paper and some train parts. So you should have 4 different train parts in your kit. 4 different train parts, and you can glue them on to make your own Polar Express. We chose black paper so that way you can make it look like it's nighttime. And then markers to decorate. And then I'm gonna have my kids use some chalk to decorate the black part. But for that you can of course also use white crayons or gel pens or gel markers or even paint if you're feeling ambitious. So whatever you have for that. And now you can make your own Polar Express picture too to go with the book. But thank you and have fun.